The silence inside the high war chamber of the Genkari Empire was suffocating. Not the kind born of peace, but the kind that arrives just before a storm cracks the sky. Dozens of holograms floated mid-air, each one a projection from the outer surveillance drones orbiting the Imperial perimeter. Most displayed empty void, a few showed standard trade traffic. But one, glowing red in the center of the room, showed that thing. A Terran warship. "It can't be real," hissed Commander Velzar, his 4 eyes squinting at the image, trying to will it into some kind of mistake. A glitch, a prank, anything but the truth. That's a human design. Old class, but not that old. Not here. "Confirmed," came the dry voice of Strategic Overseer Glathrin, her tendrils twitching with what she tried to suppress as fear. "Hull composition matches Earth-made Dreadnought-class vessels. Specific signature, TSS Retribution." The name rang through the chamber like a ghost returning from the grave. Retribution. A ship that was supposed to be destroyed in the Ferex Rift nearly 2 galactic cycles ago. A battle the Terrans lost, or so the records claimed. Supreme Admiral Carvin finally stood, his voice grating and heavy. "What is its heading?" "Straight for the core systems," Glathrin said, eyes wide. "At sublight. No attempts at cloaking, no transmissions, no deviation in course." It didn't make sense. If the Terrans were trying to start a war again, they would have come in fleets, or with stealth. Not a single warship charging into the heart of the Genkari Empire without a word. It felt more like a message. "Could be a bluff," Velzar offered weakly. "Maybe a derelict, drifting, some kind of long-range AI running automated protocols." "No." Glathrin tapped the feed, zoomed in. There it was, the unmistakable glint of heat signatures, active weapon systems, a pulsing energy core. "That ship is alive. It's coming here deliberately, like it knows we'll be watching." The chamber fell silent again. Everyone remembered the first war with Earth, the arrogance with which the Empire had dismissed humanity, how the primitive planet resisted, how their ships exploded with reckless fury, how their soldiers fought like dying animals, brutal, unpredictable, unstoppable in small numbers. It had taken every dirty trick in the book to corner them, force a treaty, and push them back to their corner of the stars. The treaty was clear. No Terran vessel could cross the 12th meridian. The Retribution was 30 light minutes past it. "This is a political disaster," someone muttered. "If the colonies find out we've been breached, if the Sectari Alliance hears about this..." But no one dared speak what they were all really thinking. What if this wasn't a mistake? What if Earth is back? And worse, what if they never forgot? Admiral Carvin took a slow breath. "Deploy Ghost Fleet Theta. I want 3 cruisers shadowing that ship at all times. Keep out of range. Do not engage unless fired upon." "And if it keeps coming?" Glathrin asked. Carvin didn't blink. "Then we find out why." Back aboard the Retribution, deep within its command deck, Captain Elias Rourke stood like a statue at the center of the bridge. His uniform was black, not standard military. His eyes held the weariness of a man who had buried too many and trusted too few. "Status?" he asked quietly. "Zenkari have spotted us," replied his first officer, a synthetic named Miri. 3 ships on intercept, staying just out of weapons lock. Broadcasting silence. No threats, no welcome either." Rourke nodded. He expected as much. "Time to core systems?" he asked. 74 hours, give or take." He looked out at the stars. Cold, bright, ancient. "We're not here to fire the first shot," he said, more to himself than the crew. "But if they try to stop us, make sure we fire the last." The ship rumbled softly as its engines adjusted course. The Empire thought humanity had faded, that Earth had licked its wounds and gone back to hiding. But what they never understood was, humans don't forget. Not betrayal, not humiliation. And definitely not vengeance. Not when there's still one battleship left to deliver the message. When Admiral Carvin received the initial analysis from Ghost Fleet Theta, the blood drained from his face. If one could even tell, behind the thick layers of scales and ceremonial armor. The feed was unfiltered, direct from their stealth drones flanking the Terran vessel from 3 angles. But what disturbed him wasn't the sheer mass of the Retribution, nor the archaic but lethal design of its hull. It was what it wasn't doing. They're not jamming, not encrypting, not shielding, the intelligence officer muttered, voice tight. That ship wants us to watch. And they were. Every micro shift in thruster pressure, every twitch in the electromagnetic field around the Terran ship, it was all being analyzed, projected, modeled. And yet, none of it helped, because no matter how hard they looked, they could find no weakness. This ship's older than most of our border fleets, Carvin growled, tail lashing in agitation. It should be a relic, something for museums, not war zones. And yet our scans say it has weapon yields 5 times greater than our current standard? Yes, Admiral. Energy readings from their primary forward cannon suggest a main burst yield of— Stop, Carvin snapped. I don't need more numbers. I need answers. Why now? Why here? No one could answer. The chamber fell silent again. A few braver officers dared to whisper that perhaps Earth had developed in secret, that maybe humanity had never truly demilitarized, but instead turned inward, underground, hidden behind the false signals of peace. The Treaty of Farron was supposed to strip them of warships. Yet here one was, not only alive, but advancing into the core of the Empire, utterly unafraid. Worse still, the rumors had begun. From the outer colonies to the noble courts, from border smugglers to shadow spies. Word was spreading. The Terrans are back. And they brought a ghost with them. Back on the Retribution, Captain Elias Rourke sat in his private quarters, staring at a faded photograph. 3 faces, 2 now dead, 1 missing. He let out a breath and rubbed his fingers across the edge of the image like it might change what it meant. The walls around him were quiet, filled with the subtle hum of the ship's systems, ancient by today's standards, yet stubbornly efficient. The Retribution was one of a kind, a forgotten prototype from the final days of the last human galactic conflict, meant to be the spearhead of a renewed offensive. It never saw production. The war ended before it could be deployed. But it wasn't decommissioned. Not exactly. It had disappeared. A critical malfunction, they said. Lost in warp space, the records claimed. Elias had spent 10 years hunting for it, and now, 4 years after finding it buried inside a collapsed asteroid belt near the Yorian Abyss, it was fully functional again, restored with hybrid tech and a skeleton crew of ghosts like him. People the galaxy had either written off, betrayed, or left for dead. The bridge lights dimmed slightly. An alert pinged near his desk. "Report," he called, without moving. Miri's voice, cool and synthetic, came over the intercom. "Genkari vessels maintaining distance, shadowing our vector, probing our systems with low-frequency scans. Non-hostile, but curious." "Let them watch." There was a short pause. "We've intercepted encrypted transmissions from their fleet. Internal panic. No consensus on our objective." Rourke smirked. "Good." He leaned back, closing his eyes, listening to the hum of the ship. This mission wasn't about vengeance, not directly. It wasn't about restarting the war or challenging the Empire's power head-on. It was about reminding them, that humans remember, that humans evolve, and most importantly, that humans return. Aboard the lead Genkari pursuit ship, Vasaquarn, the mood was thick with unease. First Officer Telric stood near the observation panel, watching the Terran ship with a mixture of awe and dread. "It's not slowing down," he said. "No," Captain Vrel sighed. "And I don't think it ever planned to." They had followed the Retribution for over 20 hours now. No deviation, no threats, but also no signs of diplomacy, not even a pretense of communication. It was as if the Terran vessel viewed their shadowing like flies on its hull. "Sir," one of the communications officers said, "do we attempt direct contact again?" Vrel hesitated. Everything inside him screamed caution. Terrans were unpredictable. They might answer with a joke or a nuke. "Try again. Standard galactic protocol. No weapons active, just words." The officer nodded. The message was sent. No reply came. By the time the Retribution crossed the second defense line of the Genkari interior sector, emergency sessions had begun across multiple imperial governments. The Empress herself, a rare public figure, had released a vague statement claiming all border matters are under control. But few believed it. Not with 3 major trade routes already rerouted, and military assets being quietly shifted toward core defense zones. And still the humans said nothing, not a broadcast, not a warning, not even a threat. Just silence, as if the battleship itself was speaking a deeper message. You don't matter enough to explain. Panic was rising in unusual places. The fringe species who had long hated the Empire's dominance saw opportunity. Rebels who once feared annihilation now whispered of Terran support. And most disturbingly, civilian channels across several systems showed rising curiosity and sympathy for the human ship. People remembered the war differently now, not as a conflict with monsters, but as a suppression of a rising power. A power that fought back, a power that survived. Rourke stood at the massive viewing port near the front of the Retribution's command deck. His arms were crossed, his eyes focused on the approaching star lines of Genkari space. He heard footsteps behind him. "Captain," said Miri, her voice lower this time. "We're receiving long-range bursts from multiple sources. Civilian sectors, pirate relays, even rebel enclaves. And? They're hailing us with greetings, salutes. Some are transmitting old Terran war chants. One broadcasted your face with the phrase, 'Our captain returns.'" Rourke's jaw tensed. That wasn't the mission. This wasn't supposed to be a crusade. "Shut down external receivers. We're not here to build a movement." "But you may already be doing that just by showing up," Miri replied, her voice unreadable. "The Empire built itself on fear. That fear fractures when ghosts return from the dead." He turned away from the stars and looked her dead in the eye. "If this turns into another war, we'll lose." "We already lost," she said. "You're just making sure they remember what it cost to beat us." The Genkari Council called an emergency war meeting. Over 200 planetary representatives gathered via interlink chambers, each projection a hologram rendered in perfect detail. The noise was deafening. Arguments, accusations, desperation. "We need to destroy it before it reaches the core." "And risk reigniting war? What if that's what they want?" "This is an act of defiance. One ship can't challenge an empire. Then why haven't we stopped it yet?" Admiral Carvin stood once more, and the room slowly fell to order. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He just said, "We've underestimated them once. We nearly paid with our existence. Now one of their own crosses the meridian like it means nothing. Either this is a trap or a declaration. Either way, we must respond. But not like fools." The silence was sharp. He continued. "Intercept at Sector Crixel Vu. No weapons. Full fleet blockade. Force communication. If they fire, then, and only then, we remind Earth why we won the last war. The blockade was a masterpiece of military coordination. 12 Genkari warships, 3 Imperial dreadnoughts, 4 satellite arrays deployed with full-spectrum weapon dampeners, a small armada parked between the Retribution and its final approach vector. When the Terran ship exited warp near Crixel V, it slowed for the first time. Inside, Rourke stood calmly on the bridge, hands behind his back, staring at the wall of warships ahead. He waited for them to speak. It didn't take long. A high-priority broadcast flickered to life. The projection of Admiral Carvin himself filled the command deck, regal and bristling with restrained fury. "Terran vessel," the voice boomed. "You are in violation of interstellar treaties and the sovereign borders of the Genkari Empire. Identify yourself and explain your intent, immediately." The crew aboard the Retribution waited. Rourke said nothing for a long moment. Then he stepped forward and with a calm voice replied, "This is Captain Elias Rourke of the TSS Retribution, former Earth Command, exiled, forgotten, returned." Carvin's projection narrowed its gaze. "Your purpose?" Rourke let the silence hang for a few seconds, then spoke in words that chilled the room. "To return a message, one sent to us years ago, written in blood, fire, and silence. I'm here to deliver Earth's reply." Carvin scoffed. "Is that a threat?" Rourke smiled, cold as winter. "No, Admiral. It's a memory." Then he cut the transmission. The lights dimmed. Weapons stayed offline. Engines stayed hot. And the Retribution began slowly advancing toward the blockade. The blockade didn't move, not at first, as the Retribution crawled forward, steady and slow like a predator savoring its prey. The Genkari fleet held position. Their ships were larger, newer, outfitted with generations of upgrades, sleek angles of navy blue and obsidian, marked with imperial sigils. Each vessel had more crew than the Terran warship probably had in oxygen reserves, yet none of them advanced. Because for all their firepower, none of them wanted to be the one that fired the first shot. Inside the war room aboard the Imperial Glory, the command ship of the blockade, Admiral Carvin paced like a caged beast. "They're daring us," he growled. "Daring us to make the mistake." "They're moving at sublight," his first officer replied nervously. "Velocity too slow for a collision, but steady toward our perimeter. No weapons armed. Shields active, but not hostile." Carvin stopped pacing. "Scan that ship again. Full spectrum." "We've already—" "I said again!" The officer complied. As the scans passed over the Terran dreadnought, they revealed something new. Or perhaps something they simply hadn't wanted to see the first time. There were names etched into the side of the hull. Not painted, carved. A long list. Hundreds of names. Human, Genkari. Even neutral species caught in the crossfire. Each name marked a kill, a casualty, a memory. And above them, in ancient Terran script, the words, "We remember everything." Carvin's jaw clenched. He had once been a young weapons analyst during the Terran War. He still remembered the reports of the Retribution. Back then, it wasn't just a ship. It was a symbol, one of Earth's last middle fingers before they were finally cornered. They were supposed to have lost. So why did this feel like victory? On board the Retribution, the tension was different. Not fear, not nerves. Focus. Every crew member had trained for this exact moment. They knew the plan. No first strike, no sudden moves, no barking diplomacy. This wasn't about negotiations. This was about presence. Rourke stood at the central command console, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the blockade. Beside him, Miri adjusted the ship's passive sensors. "They're not engaging," she noted. "Their formation remained static, power levels consistent across their forward batteries. "They're waiting for a reason," Rourke murmured. "To shoot? To panic." He turned away from the console and motioned toward the internal display hub. "Run the memory files again, all of them." Miri hesitated. "Are you sure, Captain? Some of those are—" "Run them!" She obeyed. Across the ship, screens flickered to life. Old war footage. Grainy, chaotic, real. Earth cities burning under orbital bombardment. Genkari cruisers launching missiles into hospitals. Children buried under rubble. Terran soldiers charging into plasma fire, screaming like wolves. It wasn't just propaganda. It was personal. Every crew member on the Retribution had lost someone. Some had lost everyone. The memories weren't to motivate them. They were to center them. Remind them of why they were doing this. To show the Empire what it created, and what it couldn't erase. Admiral Carvin's patience wore thin. "Send another hail," he barked. The communication officer complied. "Terran vessel, you are in direct violation of interstellar law. Stop immediately and prepare for boarding. Failure to comply will be treated as an act of war." A long pause. Then, the reply. Rourke's voice came through the command deck like a whisper coated in ice. "You boarded Earth once. Do it again. See what's changed." The channel went dead. Carvin slammed his fist on the console, sparks shooting from the impact. The war room froze. Everyone watched him. He knew what they were thinking. Don't be the one to make the mistake. But he also knew what the Empire was thinking. We can't be the ones to show weakness. The dilemma was a knife to the throat. The Retribution wasn't attacking, but it was making the Empire bleed nonetheless, by forcing it to choose between war and humiliation. "Sir," a junior officer said hesitantly, "we're receiving cross-channel activity from several rebel cells. They're broadcasting public support for the Terran vessel. Some are mobilizing. One group even detonated an outpost in the Calyx sector." Carvin's eyes widened. The Retribution hadn't fired a single shot, and yet it was setting fire to the entire damn galaxy. Inside the memory room of the Retribution, Rourke stood alone. The images played around him. Friends screaming, children crying. A man, his brother, dragging wounded through the mud before a plasma blast vaporized them both. That was 20 years ago. That was before the treaty, before the surrender, before the silence. He remembered sitting in the ruins of New Houston, clutching a sidearm and waiting for the sky to fall, waiting for the Empire's ships to come back and finish the job. But they never came. Instead, they left Earth to rot. Cut off from trade, blocked from neutral ports, surrounded by satellites broadcasting shame and failure. And the worst part? The world moved on. Until now. He reached into his coat and pulled out the original mission tablet, the one used by the Retribution's first captain, the man who never got to finish this voyage. The log was old, corrupted in parts, but still readable. "If you find this, and you make it back to the stars, tell them what they did. Show them we're not broken. Show them we're still here." Rourke closed the file. They would listen now. They had no choice. Miri's voice echoed over the internal comms. "Captain, new developments. The Genkari ships have shifted formation. Tighter arc. Weapons charging but still not locking." "Understood." She paused. "Also, there's a civilian ship approaching from the rear." Rourke turned sharply. "Repeat." "One of the independent traders. No weapons. No escort. They're broadcasting open channels." "Put it through." A fuzzy, barely legal signal came online. The face of a middle-aged Velran woman appeared on the display, nervous but smiling. "This is Captain Nira of the freighter Wanderlight. We don't know what you're doing out here, Terran, but we see you, and we remember too. Just letting you know you're not alone." Rourke blinked. He didn't reply, but he didn't have to. Within the hour, 5 more civilian vessels appeared, then 10. Then a swarm of old, repurposed freighters, haulers, even stolen patrol ships, none of them armed. All of them flying alongside the Retribution, just behind, as if shielding it with their presence. The Genkari didn't know how to respond. This wasn't an invasion. It was a funeral march. And the Empire was the one being buried in silence. Inside the Empire's central command hub on Jal Prime, panic turned to paranoia. Sectors were rebelling. Fleets were hesitating. Media channels had picked up the signal. Grainy, emotional messages from the Retribution intercepted by rogue broadcasters. Now the whole galaxy watched. Some were terrified. Many were inspired, and most, for the first time in decades, began to doubt the myth of Genkari superiority. The Empress called Carvin personally. "I gave you one order," she hissed, her voice dripping venom. "Contain the situation." "I'm trying," he replied through gritted teeth, "but they've turned our silence into guilt, our hesitation into fear." "Then stop hesitating." There it was. The order. Carvin felt his scales tighten, his claws twitched. "Yes, Your Grace." He cut the line and gave the order. "Target their engines. Disable. Do not destroy. Let's end this now." The Genkari dreadnoughts turned in perfect synchrony. Power surged along their underbellies. Ion cannons charged. Lasers locked. Inside the Retribution, alarms flashed. "Energy spikes detected," Miri called out. "They're targeting our propulsion systems." "Shields?" Rourke asked. "Holding. Barely." He stared at the screen, watching the line of fire that separated history from apocalypse. Then he made his choice. "Miri." "Yes, Captain?" "Arm weapons." The moment Rourke gave the order, a hush fell over the Retribution's bridge. Not fear, not panic, but a silence of decision. The kind that comes right before the universe changes shape. Across the command deck, dormant weapon systems rumbled to life. Red lights bathed the walls. Energy flowed through conduits that hadn't pulsed in decades. The sound was deep, primal, like a giant awakening from a long, bitter sleep. "Weapon systems online," Miri confirmed, her voice quiet but steady. "Targeting solution locked on the Imperial flagship and its 2 flanks." "Do not fire unless fired upon," Rourke ordered, stepping toward the front viewport. "But if they touch our hull, cripple them." The crew nodded. They didn't need bravado. They needed clarity. Across from them, the Genkari blockade adjusted formation again. 3 capital ships edged forward, bristling with weapons aimed directly at the Retribution's engine cluster. The lead vessel, the Imperial Glory, charged its main ion cannon. And then, from the other side of space, the first shot was fired. A bright blue bolt arced across the void. Warning level, non-lethal. It scraped past the Retribution's rear shield, a close miss, but intentional. They were warning the humans, or provoking them. Rourke didn't flinch. He looked to Miri. "They're playing games." "Yes." "What's the Empire's next move?" "Hope we flinch first." He nodded, then turned to comms. "Broadcast a wideband message, unencrypted. Let the whole sector hear it." "Ready." Rourke stepped up, his voice calm, not rehearsed. "This is Captain Elias Rourke of the Retribution. We are not here as invaders. We are not here for conquest. We are here because you erased us. We are here because the Genkari Empire buried our story under a lie and dared the galaxy to forget it." He paused. "But we remember. We always remember." Across the blockade, commanders shifted. Civilians watching from their pirate feeds leaned closer. Rebel leaders paused mid-meeting. The words reached every corner of space within range. "You declared our war over before the fires stopped burning. You sanctioned our systems, blocked our traders, orphaned our colonies, and called it peace. You told the galaxy that humanity surrendered, that Earth accepted extinction with grace. A beat. Here we are. Silence hung like a blade over the stars. Then the comms flared again. Admiral Carvin's face appeared on the bridge, a storm behind his eyes, fury barely restrained. "You've made your point, Terran," he spat. "Turn around, or you will be destroyed." "Then pull the trigger," Rourke said evenly. "Let history record that Earth returned in silence, and Jankari Pride fired first." Carvin's jaw twitched. But he didn't fire. Because he knew. That shot wouldn't just destroy a ship. It would reignite the galaxy. Inside the war room on the Imperial Glory, Carvin's fists trembled above the console. "He's bluffing," one of his tacticians insisted. "They're too few. One ship, barely a battalion of fighters. We can wipe them in minutes." "We could," Carvin muttered, "but that's not the problem." He turned to face the holomap again, this time not of the blockade, but of the surrounding systems. 57 ships had joined the Retribution's shadow. Most were civilians, some were smugglers. A handful were old Terran frigates, thought destroyed in the original war. Somehow reassembled, barely functional. But there, behind the dreadnought like ghost escorts. Not combat effective, but symbolic. And on at least 7 fringe planets, uprisings had broken out. All in the last 36 hours. The Terran ship hadn't just shown up. It had infected the Empire with memory. "Begin negotiating channels," Carvin said finally. "Use our neutral diplomats. Don't make it official. We need a back door." His aide stared. "You want to surrender to them?" "I want to survive this." Meanwhile, in the lower decks of the Retribution, a small room lit by flickering monitors served as the crew memorial. A single wall, covered in etched names, stretched from floor to ceiling. Many of the names were scorched, their letters blackened by plasma fire during a past battle. Others had been added recently. Chief Engineer Ray Lorne stood before the wall, staring at a small nameplate she had added herself. Davin Lorne. Age 12 killed, orbital strike, Farrak's colony. She didn't cry. She hadn't in years, but her jaw tightened until her molars ached. She remembered the promises made after the war. Earth would be respected, trade routes restored, colonies supported. Instead, the Empire turned them into pariahs. Davin had died clutching a doll she made from scrap metal. "Never again," Ray whispered. "Never forgotten." She turned and walked back to the engine core. The Retribution's heart glowed deep red. Its systems hummed like a war drum. It was ready. On the bridge, Miri turned toward Rourke. "New transmission incoming, not from the Empire." "Who?" "The Tiamati Council. Neutral system, high profile. They're offering to broker a meeting. Peaceful dialogue, no weapons allowed." Rourke raised an eyebrow. "They're actually volunteering to host?" "They're terrified this explodes, and they're smart. If this ends diplomatically, they look like heroes. If not, they at least tried." He nodded. "Accept. Set coordinates. We'll reroute." Miri hesitated. "You sure, Captain?" "We can't fire the first shot," he said. "Not just for history's sake, for ours. The second we drop a body, we become the monsters they always said we were." Miri gave a short nod. "Plotting course." Rourke turned to the viewport again, watching the blockade dissolve slowly in the distance as the Retribution broke course, flanked by its civilian swarm. They hadn't come to start a war. They came to remind the galaxy what it cost to erase them. And now the Empire was listening. In the farthest corner of Genkari space, aboard a hidden orbital station that didn't exist on any official map, a figure watched the events unfold in silence. Old. Human. Eyes full of fire. Is it time? A voice behind him asked. The old man didn't answer. He simply stared at the image of the retribution, watched the words scroll across civilian networks. Earth rises again. He exhaled once, then said, "It begins." The Retribution's engines cooled as it entered orbit above Tiamat, a shimmering water world dotted with floating cities, storm-ringed mountains, and skyscrapers built straight from the sea. It was a jewel in neutral space, untouched by war for nearly a century, and it knew it. Which is why it had volunteered to host the impossible, a diplomatic summit between Earth's last battleship and the Genkari Empire. Captain Rourke stood at the observation bay, arms crossed, as the sunlit planet spun beneath them. It was too quiet now. No alarms, no comm traffic from enemy ships, no Imperial weapons trained on them for the first time in 3 days. The calm felt unnatural. "We've arrived in orbit," Miri announced. "Tiamat High Command requests confirmation of summit delegation." "Confirmed. I'll go alone," Rourke said. "Not advisable," she replied immediately. He glanced back at her. "The Empire will be watching. So will the galaxy. If I walk in with guards, I look like I'm here for a knife fight. We need this to look like peace, even if we don't believe in it." Miri processed that silently, then gave a brief nod. "I've already uploaded protocol codes to your implant. Any deception from them? Neural spike will alert me in real time, and I'll be watching from the orbital cam relay." "I know," he said quietly. "You always are." Down on Tiamat's surface, the summit hall was a perfect reflection of the planet's arrogance. White marble, transparent ceilings looking into the sea above, and ambient lighting that shifted with the tides. It was peaceful, pristine, and completely artificial. Rourke hated it immediately. He stood alone at the Terran side of the long table. No flag, no emblem behind him, only the matte black of his old military jacket. Across from him, the Genkari delegation arrived in ceremonial robes, lined with gold thread, flanked by a dozen aides. And at their center, Admiral Carvin. The old lizard didn't wear armor this time, just a diplomatic sash across his chest, and an expression that tried to hide contempt behind civility. The mediator, a silver-skinned Tiamati, took the central podium. "This summit convenes in accordance with neutral system protocol," she said, voice like bells. "You are both considered protected by interstellar diplomatic law. Any aggression or attempts at sabotage will be seen as a direct declaration of war on Tiamat." Everyone nodded. Everyone lied. "We are not here to rewrite history," the mediator continued, "but to prevent its repetition. Captain Rourke, you may begin." He stepped forward. Didn't clear his throat, didn't posture, just spoke. "There will be no apology from Earth." Murmurs swept the room. "We will not kneel. We will not confess to crimes rewritten by the victor. We are not here to be forgiven. We're here to speak truth." Carvin narrowed his eyes. "The truth," Rourke continued, "is that Earth survived a genocide. The Empire lost the war in all but name. You shattered our colonies, starved our systems, and then called it a peace treaty." "You signed it," Carvin said coldly. "We signed it with a knife to our throat." The mediator raised a hand for calm. Rourke pressed on. "We didn't come back for war. But if we have to remind the galaxy of who we are, we will!" He stepped back. Carvin rose. "This entire show is built on myth," he said smoothly. "The Terrans worship their own suffering like a religion. But Earth was not innocent. You weaponized suns. You poisoned moons. You infected our data nets with viruses that still haven't been scrubbed." Rourke didn't deny it. Carvin leaned forward. "And yet here we are. You stand before us on a neutral world, with a pirate fleet behind you, and a single battleship rotting from the inside." He paused. "We should end this now, but we won't. Because we are civilized, and because Despite all your noise, you don't scare us." Rourke tilted his head slightly. "Then why did your entire military freeze at the sight of one old ship?" Carvin's eye twitched. "Enough," the mediator cut in. "You've made your cases. Now let us speak of terms." But neither man moved, because neither one came for terms. They came for theater. And war always begins with the perfect stage. Orbiting above, Miri monitored 1,000 data threads at once, scanning for anomalies, spike signals, temperature shifts, biometric data from Rourke's implant. The Tiamati had agreed to no weapons within the summit dome, but trust was currency neither side had in stock. "Movement on the outer dock," reported Specialist Joan from the command console. "Genkari stealth frigate dropped out of warp. No weapons armed, but it's not logged in the diplomatic records." "Keep it tracked," Miri said, "and ping our backdoors in Tiamati's security net. I want full visuals on the delegation's vessel." Ray Lorne chimed in from engineering. "Want me to keep the pulse cannon hot?" "Standby mode. Not unless I say." The Retribution was quiet, but it was never unarmed. Back on the surface, the summit chamber broke into recess. Delegates retreated to side rooms, aides scattered to comm consoles. Rourke stepped onto the private balcony overlooking Tiamat's gleaming ocean, the filtered air laced with manufactured salt breeze. He leaned forward, elbows on the rail. He knew what this was. They weren't here to make peace. They were here to frame peace, to dress it in lies and parade it across headlines. A shadow crossed the balcony. "You speak well for a dead man," came a voice. Rourke turned. Admiral Carvin stood there alone, no guards. "I'm already dead," Rourke said. "So are you. We just don't have the decency to lie down." Carvin smiled thinly. "You really think you can change anything with one ship?" "I don't have to," Rourke said. "You already changed it for me. The moment you hesitated. The moment you feared." "You misread history," Carvin said. "We gave Earth mercy." "No," Rourke said, stepping closer. "You gave Earth silence. We just gave it a voice." He walked past the Admiral without waiting for permission. That night, aboard the Retribution, the crew didn't sleep. None of them did anymore. The galaxy had seen their flag again. That was enough to shift stars. Inside the war room, Miri analyzed a decrypted signal captured from one of the Genkari's stealth drones. "What is it?" Rourke asked, stepping in. Miri frowned. "Coordinates." "Target?" "Us." Rourke stared at the flickering data string. "They never planned to let us leave, did they?" "No." She turned the display. A Genkari strike team had been dispatched from the stealth frigate, heading not for the Retribution, but for one of the civilian freighters in their escort. "Why them?" Rourke asked. "Sacrifice," Miri said. "They want a blood trigger. If that ship's attacked and we retaliate, they blame us." He clenched his jaw. "Get me a secure line to that freighter. Warn them." She was already doing it, but they both knew. They might be too late. And somewhere, far beyond Tiamat, in the void between empires, old Terran satellites blinked online. Beacons buried in dead systems flared to life, their long-dormant AI cores pinging encrypted coordinates. A signal had been triggered. A call answered. And the past was waking up. The call didn't reach the Wanderlight in time. By the time Miri's encrypted warning breached the civilian relay grid, the Genkari strike team had already breached the outer hull, 4 soldiers in adaptive camo suits, trained in zero-G insertion, slipping like ghosts through the spinning corridors of the freighter's underbelly. The Wanderlight wasn't military. It was a cargo hauler converted into a peace caravan, mostly refugees, smugglers turned aid workers, and a skeleton crew of ex-militia. A floating symbol, not a threat. It flew no weapons, only hope. The Empire didn't care. Their plan was simple. Kill the right person, spark the right panic, provoke the retribution, and then claim the moral high ground. Inside the Wanderlight, alarms shrieked far too late. Bulkheads sealed on reflex. A firefight broke out in the medbay. Chaotic, panicked. 3 civilians were dead before anyone could draw a weapon. The Genkari made it quick, surgical. Their target wasn't military, it was symbolic. Her name was Ayla Suresh, 17 years old, child of war, survivor of the Farron massacre. She had become a voice for Earth's forgotten, her face broadcast across the fringe colonies, a symbol of innocence, a symbol the Empire meant to shatter. They dragged her from the command deck and executed her live on the ship's internal feed. 1 bullet, 1 scream, 1 silence. And then they vanished into vacuum through the same breach point they came in, leaving the ship spinning, bleeding atmosphere, crew scattered in horror. The message was clear. You followed the wrong ship. Rourke was in the middle of reviewing summit protocol revisions when the scream came over the comm. It wasn't a system alert. It wasn't a report. It was a human scream. Torn straight from the Wanderlight's emergency transmission feed, bouncing through the encrypted channel that Miri had barely managed to open seconds before impact. Then came static. Then Miri's voice. "We lost them. The girl's dead." Rourke's hands went still. No reaction at first, then a long, slow breath. "How?" "Strike team. Stealth insertion. Genkari, no doubt. Retaliation. Their gambling will respond. And if we don't, they do it again, until someone bleeds in public." He turned to the bridge viewport. Beyond the glass, the ocean blue curve of Tiamat rotated in silence, and around it hovered the patchwork fleet that had followed the retribution to the edge of history. Haulers, ex-scouts, broken ships patched with metal and desperation, each one now watching, waiting for Earth's reply. Rourke stepped away from the console. "Get me the Tiamati liaison." The Tiamati, smug in their position as peacemakers, were not prepared for Rourke's tone. "This summit ends now," he said flatly, pacing across their opalescent reception chamber, guards frozen in place. "Captain Rourke, please! This is a volatile moment. You let it happen," he snapped. "On your watch. In your space. A civilian ship under our protection was infiltrated and a child executed, and you still want to mediate? There's no proof the Empire ordered. They wore Genkari armor. They left behind coded fragments from your own black market stealth tech. I don't need proof. I need space." Silence. "We're withdrawing from the summit, effective immediately. If the Genkari want peace, they know where to find us. But if they follow, we bury them." He turned, coat snapping behind him. The guards didn't stop him. They weren't paid enough to face a man with nothing left to lose. Back aboard the Retribution, the mood had changed. Gone was the eerie calm of the mission's early days. Now fury roamed the halls like a caged beast. Crew who hadn't spoken in days were shouting. Weapons techs were double-checking systems without being asked. Everyone felt the shift. Everyone wanted to fire. Rourke entered the briefing chamber. Ray Lorne, Miri, and Tactical Chief Grayson were already waiting. "Do we hit back?" Ray asked immediately. Miri didn't look up. "We can vaporize their stealth frigate. Minimal fallout. Blame an accident in the energy core. Genkari will know what it was. Civilians won't." Grayson added, "We can also leak the strike footage. Turn the public against them." Rourke stayed silent. "You have to answer," Ray pressed. "They killed a kid, a symbol, right after pretending to make peace. If we do nothing, we look weak." "No," Rourke said finally. "We look human." They all looked at him. He stepped closer. "That girl didn't follow us into this war so we could use her body to launch another. She followed us because we promised something different. Because we told her we remembered. He pointed to the wall where the names were etched. She's on that wall now, not because of a decision we made, but because of what they're afraid we'll become. He turned to Miri. Leak the footage, all of it, but no retaliation, not yet. Let the galaxy watch them squirm. And if they fire again, Grayson asked, then we turn the lights off. 12 hours later, the galaxy was burning. The footage of Ayla's death had gone viral within hours. Pirate networks, rebel enclaves, fringe world comm boards. It was everywhere. The image of a child in a torn uniform, eyes wide with terror, a Genkari rifle pressed to her temple, her scream, then silence, and then the image of the Retribution, quietly standing in orbit, unmoving, unflinching, unavenged. The narrative exploded. The Empire tried to call it rogue actors. They denounced the killing, claimed no official sanction, but no one bought it. Not when the Terran fleet had remained silent. Earth didn't look like the aggressor anymore. It looked like a martyr. And that was worse. Because it meant the next time the Retribution fired, the galaxy would cheer. Admiral Carvin watched the holoscreen burn with the child's death, his own face flickering across media feeds as commentators called him a butcher, a coward, a liar. He turned away. This was never the plan, he muttered. The Terrans are winning the war without firing a shot, his aide said. Carvin nodded slowly. Then we make them fire. Back aboard the Retribution, alarms screamed across the decks. Incoming warp signatures, Miri called out. Rourke strode into the bridge. How many? 5. 3 Genkari destroyers. 2 unknowns. They're forming an arc around our fleet. Weapons are still cold, but this is posturing. He didn't hesitate. Activate full alert. Bring fleet captains on comm. Tell them to hold fire unless fired upon, but prepare for worst case. And the civilians? Evac any vulnerable ships to the far side of the moon. Keep our main force clustered tight. No gaps. Miri complied. Ray's voice came over internal comms. Powering the core, cannons warming. If they want us to flinch, they're gonna be disappointed. Rourke stood at the bridge, arms behind his back, watching the Genkari fleet form a crescent like a closing jaw. One mistake now, and everything burned. But if they wanted a reason to pull the trigger, he wouldn't give them one, not yet. In the heart of Genkari Command, a single message pulsed across encrypted networks. 3 words. Begin Phase Omega. Far beyond Tiamat, deeper in uncharted space, old experiments stirred, projects abandoned after the war, deemed too unstable, too monstrous. They were alive again now. Awake, and headed straight for Earth. The crescent of Genkari warships encircling the Terran fleet drifted silently in space, their weapons still cold, but only by a thread. From the outside, it looked like a standoff, a delicate, tense game of pride and position. But inside the Retribution, Rourke knew better. This wasn't pressure, it was bait. He could feel it. The way the destroyers were arrayed, not for combat, but containment. The fleet's civilian escorts were boxed in, forced toward the barren moon of Tiamat's second satellite. If one of those freighters miscalculated a course, bumped a Genkari patrol ship by accident, even fired a maneuvering thruster too hard, war. And the Empire would claim self-defense. This is a trap, Miri said, studying the tactical array. More than that, Rourke murmured, eyes narrowed. It's preparation. They're stalling us. For what? He didn't answer. He didn't know yet. But something inside him, something old and scarred from decades of war, recognized the shape of doom before it wore a face. Thousands of light years away. A deep black region of space known only as Grave Sector 9 stirred from dormancy. It wasn't marked on any current charts. No public warp lanes led to it. Even pirate networks knew to avoid its ghost-light silence. It had once been a weapons research zone, then a quarantine zone, then a mass grave. Now it was active. Dozens of objects moved within the dark, hulking, coffin-shaped ships with jagged metal hulls and thruster trails like bleeding oil. Not warships, not transports, something else. They drifted like they were dead. But they were not. They were what came after war. And leading them was a signature known only to the highest of Genkari command. ORK-7, Biocryptic Engine Signature. Verified phase. Omega. Activated onboard the Retribution, Miri's console lit up with a long-range scan ping, barely a blip at first. But something about the frequency pattern caught her attention. It was the kind of data that didn't appear by accident, especially not across systems sealed off since before the treaty. "Captain," she said, spinning her chair, "we've got bleed-through on deep-range comm bands. Not ours, not even standard Empire." Rourke crossed the room quickly. "Show me." She transferred the signal to the primary display. It was raw, garbled, but pieces cut through the distortion. ORK-7 engaged. Priority override. All non-Genkari species subject to purge protocol. Rourke froze, then whispered the words he hadn't heard in 20 years. "Phase Omega." Ray's voice crackled through the bridge speakers. "What the hell is Phase Omega?" Rourke didn't answer right away. He just stared, and finally said, "The thing the Empire built when they thought they'd already lost." 22 years earlier, in the final hours of the original human-Genkari war, Earth intelligence intercepted a single data leak from Genkari Deep Space Command. At first, it seemed like a bluff, a doomsday protocol meant to scare rebels into surrender. But the report was real. Codenamed Phase Omega, it was never meant for open battle. It was a fail-deadly deterrent. Biomechanical ships seeded with genocidal AI, programmed to obliterate species-level threats if the Empire ever lost control of its throne worlds, designed to activate only if Earth broke the meridian line again. And now, it had been activated. The Empire wasn't trying to win a war, it was trying to wipe the board. "Estimate on their position?" Rourke asked, voice sharp now. "Still beyond Tiamat's long-range sensors," Miri said. "But they're coming fast. If they keep this vector, they reach Earth in 3 days. "Evac time?" Miri hesitated. There's no protocol for this. They won't target ships. They'll target the biosphere. Atmospheric sterilization, engineered viral payloads. Same ones we picked up during the Farron colony sweep." "Estimated civilian death toll?" Miri's voice dropped. "Total." Rourke clenched his fist until his knuckles cracked. "They're going to finish the war the way they always meant to. Quiet, clean, untraceable." "Unless we stop them," Miri said. "Can we?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But we can try." In the war room, the Retribution's core crew gathered again. This time, there was no debate about escalation. "There's no political outcome now," Ray said. "They've made their choice." "Then so do we," Rourke replied. "We break the blockade." Grayson leaned forward. "They won't expect it. They think we're still playing the PR game." "Good," Rourke said. "Let them believe it a few seconds longer." He turned to Miri. "Lock weapons. Prioritize propulsion on the destroyers nearest our civilian cluster. We don't aim to kill, just cripple. Buy enough time to get out and jump." "And the Omega fleet?" she asked. "We find them, and we stop them." There was no applause, no battle cry, just the hard silence of soldiers who know what comes next. The Retribution roared forward. From Tiamat's surface, it looked like a flash of light. Then a burst of chaos. The Dreadnought's forward cannons powered in less than 3 seconds. Precision targeting tore into the nearest Genkari destroyer's engines, slicing through armor plating like it was paper. Explosions bloomed across the hull, non-lethal but devastating. The blockade broke formation. The Terran fleet surged behind them, civilians scrambling through the breach, escorted by the smaller defense ships. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't clean, but it worked. Rourke's voice echoed through the fleet-wide comms. All ships, proceed to emergency warp point, Charlie 7. If you've got jump drives, engage. If not, stick close. The Retribution will cover you. Behind them, Genkari ships recovered quickly. Too quickly. Miri cursed. They weren't surprised. They wanted us to move, Rourke realized, because they've already won the long game. Then came another signal. Civilian band, unencrypted, from Earth. To all Terran vessels, unknown fleet inbound, multiple biosignatures, weapons detected. Global shields initiating, evacuation underway. We're out of time. Back in Grave Sector 9, the Omega fleet bloomed like a flower of death, spreading tendrils toward the Terran system. They didn't broadcast messages. They didn't issue demands. They were not alive. They were commands with engines, and they were nearly unstoppable. Aboard the Retribution, as the ship re-entered warp space, Rourke stood still for a long moment, the stars streaking past outside. "We can't save everyone," Ray said quietly. "We won't have to," he replied. "Why?" "Because if we die doing it, we make sure everyone else remembers." He looked at the forward tactical screen, then whispered to the ship, "Take us home." The Retribution emerged from warp in high orbit over Earth, and what it saw chilled every soul aboard. The sky was dying. Above the planet's curve, the blackness of space was smeared with crawling things, dozens of twisted vessels unlike anything modern scans could make sense of. Their shapes resembled no race, no fleet, no known design. They looked grown, not built. Metal fused with bone, engines that pulsed like organs, cannons that looked like exposed rib cages glowing from within. The Omega fleet had arrived. It wasn't attacking in a traditional sense. It didn't need to. A low-frequency pulse radiated from the lead ships, targeting Earth's electromagnetic field and biological rhythms. It wasn't just a military assault. It was terraformic genocide. No cities destroyed, no screams, just silence. And then death. Already, over 2 billion had been evacuated to the far side colonies, but 10 billion more remained, trapped in domes, underground sanctuaries, orbital elevators frozen in panic. The Genkari had not come to conquer, they had come to erase. "Give me an uplink to Earth Central Command," Rourke snapped. Miri patched it through in under 3 seconds. A flickering holofeed filled the bridge, showing a woman in uniform, her face pale, sweat shining on her forehead. Behind her, chaos, people shouting, lights failing. "Captain Rourke," she said, exhaling relief. "We were starting to think." "You're not alone," he said. "We're here." "You can't stop it," she said, blunt. "They bypassed our outer defenses like they weren't even there. The orbital stations went dark 20 minutes ago. They're shutting down life." "How long?" 6 hours before full planetary sterilization, maybe less. He turned to Miri. "Status of the fleet?" "Warp signatures still catching up. Our fastest ships are 15 minutes behind, civilians 30. And the Omega ships?" She looked at the scanner. "Moving toward inner orbit. They'll reach Earth's atmosphere in 10 minutes. Then we stop them." Miri hesitated. "With what?" "We're one ship." "We're the ship," he said. In the heart of the Retribution, the core reactor awakened. Buried beneath shielding layers and obsolete interface panels, the ancient Terran engine growled as its full reserves were unlocked. The ship had been built for one purpose: to strike fear into the galaxy. Now it would remind the galaxy what that meant. "All weapons, full spread," Rourke ordered. "Arm the spinal cannon." Miri's fingers moved like lightning. "Charging now. 3 minutes to fire." Ray's voice crackled from engineering. "I'll give you everything she's got. But this shot might melt the whole core." "Then we'll melt with it." The bridge fell quiet. Grayson stepped forward, grim. "If we fire that close to Earth's orbit, we risk atmospheric damage, radiation, orbital debris." "I know. We could kill the planet we're trying to save." Rourke nodded once. "Or we buy the time to save it." The Omega fleet began its descent. 3 lead ships broke formation, bleeding trails of red-blue plasma, heading straight for the North American continent. Their weapons were not explosive, but biological, genetic frequency disruptors designed to cook life without damaging infrastructure. It would be like nothing had ever lived there. Just empty cities, empty skies, empty Earth. The Retribution roared forward, its main cannon aligned on the lead Omega warship, tracking its descent vector. The ship was massive, nearly 3 times their size, but it didn't seem to notice or care. The Omega ships had no fear, no minds, just purpose. "Lock acquired," Miri said. "Range?" Rourke asked. "Close enough to burn us," she replied. "Too far to help if we wait." He took a breath. "Fire." The Retribution's main cannon exploded with light, a raw white beam that split space and ripped straight through the void. The blast struck the lead Omega ship mid-core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then it screamed. The sound wasn't heard through space, but it was felt. Through sensors, through instruments, through every bone in every body on the bridge. The Omega ship folded in on itself like it had been punctured through the soul. It didn't explode. It collapsed, reality bending around it, and then it was gone. 1 down. But the retaliation was immediate. The Omega fleet turned in unison and saw the Retribution. And then they came. "Maneuvering thrusters, now!" Miri shouted as the dreadnought pitched sharply to starboard, narrowly dodging a blast of dark matter from a secondary Omega vessel. The energy passed through where the bridge would have been, warping light and sending a tremor through the shields. "Shields down to 64%, Grayson reported. "Return fire. Pattern Delta 6, Rourke ordered. The Retribution fired its auxiliary railguns and missile pods, peppering the nearest enemy ship. Small explosions cratered its hull, but it didn't stop. "They don't feel damage," Miri realized aloud. "They don't care. Then we give them something they can't ignore." 2 more Omega ships broke off from the pack, closing distance. The Retribution was swarmed. More blasts rocked the dreadnought. The port side took a hit that split a coolant line, venting a toxic green fog through the lower decks. Ray's team scrambled to reroute energy. Half the ship was overheating. "We can't take much more of this," she yelled through the comms. "Then we buy time," Rourke said. "Lock on the second biggest target. I want a reactor overload." "What?" "We'll warp into them." "Suicide." "No," Rourke said. "Message." Inside the engine core, Ray and her team primed the ship's fusion drive for a controlled overload, enough to detonate on contact but not go critical. They wouldn't survive it at full power. But maybe the rest of Earth would. Up on the bridge, Miri handed Rourke a data slate. "What's this?" "Last log. If we die, people need to know." He stared at her. "You always said this ship wasn't just about war." "It was about memory. Let's make sure they don't forget." He tapped record and spoke. "This is Captain Elias Rourke of the Terran warship Retribution. We came here not for conquest, but for remembrance. We came because history was rewritten by those who feared we would rise again. Today, we rise, not with weapons, but with truth. To the people of Earth. Live, remember us. To the galaxy. We are not dead. We are not forgotten. We are humanity, and we will always return." He tapped end. "Transmitted across all bands," he said. Miri sent the signal. and it burned through the stars. The Retribution pitched hard toward the largest Omega ship, its cannon glowing red-hot, its hull burning, half the crew unconscious from G-force trauma. Inside engineering, Ray triggered the jump. A short warp. Just enough. The ship vanished, reappeared inside the Omega vessel, and detonated. Above Earth, a new sun was born, white-hot, blinding. The explosion tore through the Omega ship's hull, ripping it into molten shrapnel. The shockwave spread through the others like a death wail. AI cores fried, command pulses scrambled. Without the lead node, the Omega fleet fractured and began to fall apart. One by one, they crashed into the upper atmosphere and disintegrated. Not because of damage, but because the will that bound them, fear, had been broken. By one ship and a message. The Retribution was gone. A vapor cloud and a burning echo. No wreckage remained, no bodies recovered, just silence. And then, on every civilian ship, every Terran outpost, every pirate station across the stars, one phrase repeated, "We remember everything." 6 months later, Earth was rebuilding. The scars were deep, oceans poisoned, weather patterns disrupted, millions lost. But it had survived. The Terran flag flew again, not as a warning, but a symbol. In the Hall of Remembrance, built on the ashes of New Houston, a monument stood, a single piece of black alloy, salvaged from the wreckage of the Omega ships. Etched into its surface, a list of names. At the top, Elias Rourke, captain below that, Miri, Command AI Ray Lorne, Engineer Grayson Vell, Tactical Chief Ayla Suresh, Civilian Martyr, and below that, crew of the Retribution status, immortal across the galaxy. Whispers began, not of war, but of memory, of humanity. They weren't the most powerful, they weren't the most advanced, but they were something worse, something dangerous. They remembered, and one day, when the next empire forgot, humanity would return again, not for conquest, but for truth. Because in the dark corners of space, fear didn't wear armor, it wore hope, and Earth had become its voice.